Everybody, man, this is Anthony Brogdon, and I'm coming at you strongly, stronger, strongest, with the new format for Strong Inspirations, where every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live show. I pick a topic, people suggest topics, and we get it on. I find in best way I possibly can some people who can help lead the discussion. And I got a lady today that y'all gonna really like. This sister. Oh my God. She let me back up here. If I didn't say I'm Anthony Brogdon, I'm the guy who's the host of this show, where I give it to you through the guests, straight no chaser. We intoxicate your mind with this good Black history. All right, my friends? And so, a couple housekeeping things. I myself, to validate me just a tad, I'm a filmmaker. I've done this documentary on the rise of Black business in America. It's streaming on Amazon. I've written this book also on the rise of Black business in America. It is also on Amazon. And I've written this children's book, They Did It. It's only available on my website, businessintheblack.net. Now I do public speaking, and I'm speaking all over. And if you're so interested to have me come to your town, your community, your city, speak at your church, otherwise, let me know. You can find all my information, contact on my website, businessintheblack.net. And I'm super excited about today's show because today we're going to talk about keeping Black history alive in Florida, which is representative of Florida is of what they're doing in other cities and school districts across America, where they try to limit what is taught. So tonight I have again the illustrious Reverend Rhonda Thomas of Faith in Florida. Miss Thomas, please come on and let's you. I'm gonna let you take it. I'm gonna ask some questions, but let's talk about what Faith in Florida is and what you're trying to do.
All right. Good evening, everyone. And I do appreciate you, my brother, and thanking you for including me once again as we here in Florida um, continue to take the lemons that we were given through our governor and legislators and Board of Education in the diluting of the teaching of Black history, and we continue to promote it, not through our public education system, but through our churches and the community overall. So we're doing great here in Florida. As far as our Black history, the teaching of it, it has grown, it's steady growing in ways that it wasn't really on my agenda, but I'm allowing it to take its own course. We're steady adding to our toolkit. For those who don't know, we created a toolkit where our faith leaders can choose to teach from a variety of teachings. And it's not just for children, but it's for adults as well. We have 29 states that have um, joined in under the leadership of Faith in Florida to use our toolkit, along with over 500 congregations in the state of Florida. And from the growth of it, we now have a zillennial, which that's Gen Zs and millennials have created a space. I've created a department that stemmed from our Black history teaching. And it's not just Gen Zs and millennials from the state of Florida, but also from various states that connects together and they meet twice a month virtually to talk about Black history out of their lenses, their appreciation for it. And they also have added to the teaching of African American history, which is just a plus for us overall, because it would have appeared when we first started this that our young people did not know much about history, but I found that to be not so true. There is a large group of young people that is very familiar with where they come from and what we've gone through as Black people. And it's just a blessing to see how it has spread it in a positive way. And what we're doing here in Florida. Our legislators, well, the Board of Education, if I may say, they took away Black history and they put in the teaching of communism in our public schools, which we find it to be very interesting. Nevertheless, it has not detoured us because the teaching of African American history, Black history, is still a part of American history. We're still teaching it raw and real, and it will continue. It will not be diluted under no means necessary.
With that said, let's back up just a minute and give a little. Uh, how did all this come about? What was Black history like in Florida before DeSantis?
Um, Before DeSantis, it was not diluted. Um, it was just many we found ourselves dependent on our education system to do all of the teaching. I want to say we dropped the ball as faith leaders, because um, not that our educators was teaching it in a way to offend white children, but we found that it was not being taught in a way of going back even before the civil rights movement. And so our teachers, I see where I am frozen. I'm going to try
Okay,
to
you're
continue
fine.
this. I'm
Go
all
ahead.
right. So if I have to go off and come back on, I would.
Okay.
And so our Board of Education, for whatever reason, did not want to meet with us. They said they would meet, but they stood us up. And that's when the faith leaders and our faith leaders across the state of Florida realized we dropped the ball, but we've picked the ball up, and the ball is on a train that's steady moving. Um,
Let me ask you this. I had heard that at one point, and maybe it wasn't DeSantis, but whoever the governor was, spent a lot of money, millions, having their teachers go to special training to learn Black history and to be sensitive to Black students. Is that true or not?
I don't know how much money was spent in what one would call a lot of money,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but it was where not the governor prior to DeSantis was Rick Scott. It's hard for me to believe he would want to invest like that, but there was a series of teaching and trainings in a way where Black history can be taught in a broader way, from what I
okay,
understand. And then when DeSantis came along and he wanted to say that Black people benefit from being slaves, and then realizing then the way it was being taught, he thought white children will be offended by the not so much the teaching, but the truth of what was being taught.
right.
Um, the teaching always had its space, but I trusted that none of our educators here in Florida was teaching it in any way to offend white children. But it was as if they did not want white children to know the real history of how Black folks were being treated, whether it be in the state of Florida or in this country overall.
What was there something special about Florida other than DeSantis that made it a unique case point, case study, or what have you?
I I honestly feel that the Moms of Liberty played a role and an influence, um, because it was that group that wanted to lead the effort in banning books, and in banning books included African American teachings. Um, that's the way I see it. Um, and then they also had a target on our public education system, and they still do. And it's not just in Florida, but they were created. I mean, they're from Florida and they have grown and expanded across the country. But they pushed the issue of the banning of books. that also included a lot of the teachings of Black history.
What else did they want to ban? LB,
Yeah, the
GQ,
LGBTQ, anything
yeah.
around, yeah. Even some immigrant teachings they wanted to ban. And then they from that time, from I think when we spoke last year, from that point to now, they were in the state of Florida was targeting various school board seats that they would run, and then to help reshape the curriculum of our public education system. Um, and I know it was 14 counties that was targeted in our primary, and many of them were running for those 14 counties, those public education seats. But Faith in Florida did a phenomenal job along with others, and whether it was candidate forums or just getting people out to vote, that they did not win all 14 seats with our school boards. In fact, they only won 4.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah, I mean, if you can say that, yeah, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Awesome.
yeah.
they even attempted to call Faith in Florida to see, and I don't know what strange thoughts were going through their head, that they thought they called to see if they could be of any assistance to Faith in Florida in the teaching of African American history. And and they made several calls. I At that time I really did not have the full understanding of what they were capable of, or what they had done, or what their purpose was. But if I had known now, I would suggest they call back. I would take the call this time because I have a full understanding, because from that time I have organized some moms of liberation.
Oh,
So I don't think you're ready for that group of mothers. So that's just the
what,
work that we do.
okay, let's say this. But they have DeSantis has been effective. Are there people who like what he's doing?
He has a following that likes what he's doing. He does. I can't take that from him. I mean, he controls the following. He controls the legislators. Florida, it is a super majority of legislators that don't really line up with the values of Black or brown people. So there have been much um, has been created. In fact, I just read an article that even with Project 2025, they tested the state of Florida under the leadership of DeSantis to see if anything can be done through legislation. And the diluting and the teaching of African American history and the target on public education was definitely a part of the test that he was successful in. And so I would never try to um, say that he does not have a following. He
Right.
does.
Yeah.
But
Let me ask you this: is this all because of Trump? Was he before? You know what I mean? Did Trump kind of set the stage for this type of attitude in Florida? And let me expand that. Do you think he's also set the stage for this nationally? Because this is going on all over America, in Texas, and so on and so forth.
yeah, I don't know if he literally set his pace under Trump. I don't know that, but I had conversation with a Black clergy who was a Republican. In fact, it was a millennial who said to me, he said, "You think all of this is coming from DeSantis?" And to us, it was. And he made comment to say some of this is still under the leadership of Jeb Bush. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But the fact that he made that comment just reminded me of some of the other um, tactics that was made through our public school system that was under the leadership of Jeb Bush. I don't know how close Jeb Bush, or do him and DeSantis really interact or what, but I do know that the creator of Project 2025 whether it was under Trump or the what is that? Can't think of the foundation.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
whether directly under them, but
yeah, right.
the fact that they used Florida as a test and was successful says volumes, even in the platform of what Trump is now um, attempting to lead.
On this show, I want to keep it real in this regard, and you can ask, you can nod your head, or you can respond to this question: is this racist?
I think everything that goes on in this country is racist. This country was built on racism. It has not gone away. We have a tendency of, to me, and I'm just saying, Rhonda, as Black people, just because we have progressed, and we have progress. When I think about where we are now, where my grandmother was,
Right,
but we have not arrived. They've modernized a lot of what racism and even slavery looks like. Just look at our um, 2 and 3 sided criminal justice system.
right.
Trust me, if Barack Obama had 34 um, felonies, he probably would not be
Oh,
residing where
no
he is.
question, no
So,
question.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah, no, no
yeah,
question.
they just modernized it, and we've gotten confused. I remember um, a couple of years ago, and we were getting ready for an election, a gubernatorial election, and one of our senior saints reminded me as a young Black woman, and she said, and she was talking about South Beach in particular. She said, just because they have allowed us to sleep in their hotels and eat in their restaurants does not mean we have arrived. Because she was pointing out when South Beach did not allow Black people
Yeah, I remember that.
to come on that beach unless they were working as maids
Right.
and that type of domestic work. And so sometimes, with our young people and tourists who love South Beach,
Right.
don't really understand the history of that very South/Miami Beach.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I got you. I've been there many times. Hey, man, so how was Black history taught before this happened? Was there a class in the,
It was
in
just
the
part of the
classroom?
It
Yeah,
was
how
a
was it taught?
it was a part of the curriculum of teaching history, as a
Okay.
segment, and they may have highlighted it a little more than during Black History Month. And I don't even think that they put forth the effort of teaching it in its realness, um, because it was taught on a curriculum that fit a public school system. So now that we're teaching it in from our churches, um, we're teaching it in even with biblical lenses and use an example of King James, whom often study and preach and teach from the King James version, but they not our Black clergy had not yet said that he he had slaves. He didn't even like women. And so they don't
Mhm.
teach that part of it, but it has
Okay.
come out since the teaching of Black history, because if you're going to teach it, teach all of it.
Okay.
And and so that's what has been created in this, over a year of what we've done with our toolkits.
Do they still celebrate Black History Month?
Yeah, but it has a whole lot of limitations now. So, for example, a school one of our public schools in Florida may invite someone like me to come in and speak. They wouldn't dare invite me now. And it's not that they don't want to, it's the fact that it has to go through so many um, levels of getting approval. Since we created Black History, there was a organization or funder that had invited me to bring some young people to Alabama just to tour and visit the museums. And I really want to use a lot of our kids from our public school system, and to find out that that was one field trip that they didn't have to pay for, but it could not be approved due to the Board of Education. So I just, do what I do. I get our kids. Faith in Florida has a youth department, and you know how many children are in our churches?
Yeah,
And
right.
we worked that. We did it that way. They were not even allowed. The schools were not even allowed to um, um, allow the kids to use it as a field trip to come to our first Black History convening that was taking place in February 2025. It just so happened some parents said, well, February 2024. It was just so happened some parents said, well, I'll take off. I'll take my kids out of school. I'll bring them because the governor don't tell me what to do with my children.
Yeah.
So we have come from the time that we launched this. You'll be surprised what all we have had to do. I started getting hate mail on my church. We had to do the active shooter trainings. We had to build some extra security. I now have a police officer that sits in front of our church every service, just because of some of,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Let
So
me ask you this. What would happen if you were a teacher and that you said some Black history in your classroom that a student could go and tell the principal, hey, my man said Harriet Tubman was a nice person. She did the Underground Railroad. The principal would then report the guy could get fired. Is that, yeah, how does that go?
that's real. Even a kid can go and tell their parent. And the parent that may be against it or know that there's our teachers have so many limitations of what they cannot say. It was even talked about where can they put cameras in the classrooms to make sure that our educators are not teaching,
They that vicious about it.
and making sure that they're not responding to children who are a part of the LGBTQ community or transgender children, is that they're that vicious. Yes, they are. But
Okay,
one
so
of
yeah, I'm in class and I say, well, uh, Daniel Hale, the doctor did open heart surgery. Oh, that's the Black History moment. Oh, we got you. Is it to that extent, maybe?
it is to that extent, to the point where our educators, many of them operate in a level of fear because they can lose their job or be get in trouble. From what they use the word suspended. So they're walking on eggshells, literally on what they teach, how they teach it. They've literally have been stripped of their own professionalism in the
Hmm.
state of Florida.
Wow. Okay, how about this one? And I'm gonna open up the floor in a little bit, everybody who's watching. But how about this one? Let's say I'm at an all-Black high school. The principal is Black, all the administrators. Do you believe, and we ain't naming no names, some of them are saying some things to the students on the slide?
I think there are some of our educators that are creative enough to share some teachings in a way of protecting them, encouraging them, and pushing them. And they're walking on eggshells with even that form of encouragement. Now, do I think there are some Black folks that will still go and tell? Oh, yes, I do.
Really?
Um, just because we look the same. Um, there are some that have been blessed to move on the other side of the track, but have forgotten. And it's unfortunate. So do I think that exists? I sure do, without a shadow of a doubt. You know how many you you know what it was a sad commentary when I had white congregations and white faith leaders who were willing to teach Black history from their white churches, but teaching it in a way of accountability when it was times when we had to almost convince Black clergy to say why this is so important. It's not like we was asking the pastor or the apostle or the bishop or whomever, whatever title, to literally teach it, because we still have Black history sitting on the pews. And just some of our saints speaking of their own life is a teaching.
Right. Sure, sure.
And so, but you'll be surprised how many that said no, they wouldn't take the pledge, or they chose not to. And I had some whites that were like, please include me.
All right. Well,
So
I got
that was an eye opener for me.
yeah, I'm
Um,
sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Couple more here, and I'm gonna like say open it up. What is the what is there a group of white people that are fighting against this, or your best hope maybe at this point, along with the effectiveness that you're doing, is that DeSantis gets out of there and the next guy gets in there and says, "Hey, I'm changing that rule."
Well, the first part of the question, I do think there are groups of white folks that is against it, because we have hate groups everywhere. And in the state of Florida, I think it's Tampa and Jacksonville, Duval County and Hillsborough, who have the largest amount of hate groups, as well as the largest group of Nazis in Orlando. You wouldn't believe they're now hanging out with Mickey, I guess. So those groups exist, yes. And then I think there are some who they're not a part of the group, but still don't want it being taught because they're afraid that that history will make their children and grandchildren feel bad, or understand that, or even question them. Did you really do this to Black people? So I think there's, you have that group that exists. Um, and whether they're DeSantis followers or not, I just think that there's just that it's a group of who I don't want my kids to know what took place.
Mhm. But the back part of the question is, what we gotta hope he loses in the next election, and
Oh,
and and
DeSantis,
and, and that's when and
yeah.
have y'all found somebody that could be a competent person to run against him that could maybe get him out of office?
He terms out in 2026. We do have a responsibility on so many levels to pray and hope that someone would run that will contradict and change and redo some stuff that he has created to hurt a lot of not just Black people, but brown people as well. He has created a lot of legislation that is just horrible. We got amendments that's coming up this election that you may be surprised what all, Amendment 3 and 4 is what the people want. Those are our amendments because we had to do a ballot initiative to get it on as an amendment, and that's recreational marijuana and a woman's choice. Now, what's not ours that he's pushing is making school board seats partisan. Now, why would that be? Um, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or whatever the case is, why is that so important for it to be partisan? So Floridians have 6 amendments that we need to be concerned about and really get out to vote. And then at the same time, remembering what all was created during the 8 years of his leadership. Now, I must say that Black folks have a tendency of forgetting stuff quickly. And so we have to often go back and remind them that this was created under his leadership. He literally has the state Supreme Court stacked to work in his favor. He embraces lawsuits um, because to take it to the next level of appeal, he has that stack. It looks just like basically the Supreme Court that was created by number 45.
With that said, again, I'm gonna go to this, and I'm asking the same question, maybe different. What's the best case scenario?
Um, in what level of the
And from the
teaching?
education level, for sure,
As the
and the
education,
teaching Black history.
yeah. We've lost, because of this horrible legislation, the state of Florida has lost some very good teachers, whether it's in the public school system or higher learning, because it has really, really made it bad. So we as a, Faith in Florida has a responsibility to continue to educate Floridians all across the state. That's number one. Number two, even reminding them who did what. And then thirdly is we can make a change by registering to vote and getting out to vote. We don't have to just keep putting up with some foolishness. We do have the power. I just believe that we have more power than what we realize, or we have more power than what we realize, or so many wouldn't go to such extremes to either dilute history or to attempt to dilute it, or to go to such great extremes to oppress our votes, especially Black folks.
Right.
So we have to be operating in some form of power that we don't even realize exists ourselves. And so that's what Faith in Florida does. We teach them that, how powerful our voices are, whether it be from the beginning of history, because you got to keep in mind, look at the extremes. When you look at Black history, they went through a great level of trauma, to inject trauma on us to keep us from moving forward. Why? We must be a powerful group of people.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. Um, what is so God got you, and God is, he's got you, and he's got to step in for things to make a change, and the students have to accept what's going on and themselves be eager to learn who they are, so on and so forth.
One of the best, I think some great things have happened under our toolkit. And one of those things is I've never seen youth. I have a youth department. Our Gen Zs and millennials unite as one. And they created a campaign of They Not Like Us. And they're reaching out to their own peers and inviting them in spaces that goes beyond our what our schools offer, where they can talk about how they're feeling, how they see history, and if they don't stay woke and stay up on the game, that history can have a tendency of repeating itself. But they're not ready for that, and they're going to make sure that it does not repeat itself in the way that their great grandparents, because they would not be able to endure. They don't have the tolerance, and they know it. And so, but that's the positive thing about what has stemmed from those lemons that we were given. They had no idea that we were going to make this much lemonade. And so that's where we are. We're getting ready for 2025 convening, and they're leading several of our panel sessions. We have invited Damien. Oh my God, I can't think of Damien's last name, but he is from Alabama. When they had the brawl in Montgomery, Alabama, on the riverfront, he's coming to be, and he threw his hat off, and everybody remember
I know you're
that
talking
brawl.
about. Yeah.
And when he threw that cap off, we got a taste of liberation. While we were in Montgomery, visiting the museums, and I encourage everyone to go to Alabama, because you're talking about a life-shaking. I'm still trying to process what all I experienced.
Yeah.
But we met Damien, and he was still out there working. And it was a lawn chair out there that he didn't even realize was there. And we invited him to Florida for our Black History convening to come and share his story. And it is a story. The media and social media saw one part, but there's a story that goes with it on who he was literally fighting.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me open up the floor. I know there's some people joining us. Is anyone that would like to ask a question?
I would like to ask a question. First, thank you for all the information you have shared tonight. It was very informative. One of the things that stuck out with me is when you said that they was afraid to make young white children feel guilty. But you can, uh, do you feel like if we have more open conversations with our children to tell them how to receive the information? Because it's maybe how they're interpreting the information and, you know, kind of like guide them through it. Would that help having,
I,
having
first of
to
all,
speak?
yeah, that's a good question. I just think that our legislators, as well as the governor, did not trust our educators to operate in a level of professionalism in teaching African American history. I don't think it's not one of them that were deliberately saying, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to teach it. And when I finish, all the little white children are going to feel so bad. I don't think no one had that mindset. I just felt like that it was a group that realized they screwed up. Their grandparents, their own grandparents screwed up in the way they taught, treated Black people, and to know that now it's being taught, and it has always been taught. It's still a part of American history. That now all of a sudden they want to protect white children. Well, nobody thought to protect us. No one thought to protect me. They didn't think that I would be offended to know that my grandmother was treated that way. And so I just feel like, number one, I do believe, and I strongly believe that as Black people, we should have an obligation to teach our children where they come from. And maybe that would even change the way they look at life. To know that what all their grandparents, great grandparents had to endure, and that they were gifted a legacy. And I don't think it's been enough teaching from home on who we are, and and to teach our children to know that they come from greatness, but it came with a price. Secondly, I think our churches dropped the ball, and the ball rolled so far down the street and down the hill that it's hard to even catch, because as the Black church, that's what we did. But I don't think it's too late, because we have some intelligent children, and they not like us, and they don't see things the way we see it. But just to think that if they really, really understood our history, it would make a huge difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let me ask you this: is that all of your question, caller?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Now, there's different points of Black history. There's Black history where Black and white people work together. There's Black history when, as DeSantis said, I want to talk about how we train Black people. Well, there's some truth to that. That's what I talk about in my book. Black millionaires and rich people that they got their training on the plantation, and then they took it to the next level and used it as a business, things of that sort. Even that is something that can't be taught. So you can't say nothing about a Black person in the classroom.
Just the teaching of our HBCUs and the richness of
all
some of
that.
our
Yes.
HBCUs. And some of our kids, unfortunately, think that if they don't go to Ivy League White School, they won't get the best education. But I'd hate to tell them the devil is a lie. Because some of our HBCUs, they got it going on. And if you look closely, guess who's coming to our HBCUs?
Yeah.
Well, now they're the minority, because I looked at Florida A&M University football team, and I had not seen so many white legs on the football field, on the football field. And why is that?
Yeah, that's true.
And so I just think our history is so rich and so broad, and it could be taught on so many levels.
Right.
We will never probably finish or complete the teaching
Right.
of our own history. We were kings and queens.
That's right. That's
And
right.
if we don't tell our children they're still kings and queens, or they have the capabilities of being a king or a queen, I just think that the teaching should never stop.
Is there another question, anyone? Okay, I got one. How do y'all teach? How did the churches do? What do y'all give them a template and say, okay, after service on Sundays, I need you to take an hour to have all your young adults go into a, yeah, go from there.
I think that it was taught differently across the country. Once we provided the toolkit that they could choose, and it was so much. Some of them said, "Oh my God, this is so much. Where do I begin?" And I'm like, "Well, don't try to do it all. Try some. Whether you want to focus on children, whether you want to focus on adults, teenagers. Test it." And so, what some of the feedback that we've gotten is some incorporated into, they created a class just for Black history, and they saw that class was larger than their Sunday school class. Some included it in their Sunday school. Some have actually, before the benediction, they make sure that some history is being talked about in a
Okay.
way of a teaching. And so I think it has strengthened the Black church. Also, what has happened, it has united Black and white churches in ways that we had not been united, because I've had several white churches inviting some of my staff to come in and actually sharing and teaching Black history. That has united us.
Okay.
And so because they was totally against the diluting of the teaching of African American history. They understood that it was still history. So
Okay.
yeah.
Let me ask you this. What's the status of the Black history museums? I was in Orlando earlier this year, and I went by the MIMS, Florida, the Harry T. Moore Museum.
Yeah.
I went by the Wells Built Museum, and I'm giving them plugs right now. Everybody, when you were in that Florida, that area, and that was just the two that I went by. I actually spoke at each one of them. Is he coming after the museums too in some respects?
I don't think he's coming after the museums, but what he has done was cut the budget where no funding will go to arts, if I'm not mistaken, which also may have tampered with funding that would have gone to museums, or even, it was on St. Augustine wanted to build a museum in St. Augustine, which has a lot of history.
Yep.
South Florida in Opelika, they were bidding to build a museum that was going to bring the history of Miami and the historic Overtown. But then there was also some it was some in the budget, he cut out where funding would go to the arts, which would have normally fell in the line of some of our museums.
Have white corporate America kind of stepped up and felt that kind of did something to the gap? Anything like that?
Not in Florida. White corporate America has another agenda that don't really line up with the values of Black people.
Usually McDonald's has a component or something like that. Some of the automakers or what have
Well, we have some that play both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, don't make me call the list.
Yeah,
But
right.
but they play both sides. They will do this, but yet they will still endorse someone that don't line up, or they will give to their party or their campaign. And so they play both sides.
Okay. What about the private schools? Do they fall under his privy too?
The
Catholic schools or whatever that might be?
I won't say the Catholic schools, but there are some charter schools
Right.
and private schools that will, by choice, fall under the agenda that he pushes.
Oh man.
Especially in, if you say South Florida, where we have a very large Republican Cuban population.
Okay.
And so some of their schools falls up under the agenda of DeSantis, as well as one of the candidates for 2024.
Yeah. Is there a united front of a group like Faith in Florida and what you're doing? Is there somebody in Texas that's also mobilizing in such a way?
I
Because you
don't,
said y'all are kind of doing this nationally now, which
yeah,
stands out.
because people like you who allowed me to come on your show and
Yeah.
others, and then with the Washington Post, and they realize that if this is going on in Florida, it can go on here. Georgia attempted to do the same thing, and they were able to fight back, and Black history is now back into the public schools. But I'm quite sure there's still a battle on who wins or whether it remains. So I'm quite sure there are groups that are pushing something in their own state. But I think what stood out with us is for so many states, they keep their eyes on Florida because they figure if they do something crazy in Florida, eventually it will come to us. And that's exactly what has happened and is happening. And so they just found reason to say, let me just join what Faith in Florida is doing, because they've already created this in a way that's making it work. And I
I
think
got
that's
you.
how we've grown to where we are. And it just so happened that out of that creation, what stood out is the millennials and the Gen Zs, which is what Faith in Florida called the Zillennial Department. They are like, regardless of what state I'm in, I want to take what I'm learning from Faith in Florida to go back to educate and to draw our own peers, regardless of what state. And so, like Texas and Georgia is heavily a part of what we're doing.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah.
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 Hey, was this Faith in Florida's mission? What's it was? Or did y'all just see this as a need and then just went on attack?
Yeah. Well, we were tired of fighting all of the horrible legislation that was being passed that hurt Black and brown communities. And so when they came up with the diluting of teaching Black history, I personally like, okay, now you've gone too far. This is ridiculous. Why you don't trust our professionals in allowing our educators to do their job? And that's when I said, well, let me attempt to set up a meeting with the Board of Education before it actually went in effect. And they stood me up. They said, yeah, we'll meet. But they didn't show up. And one meeting was in Tallahassee, which where the capital is, and one was in Miami-Dade County. And they just stood us up. And I said, okay, you're only going to stand me up so long. And remember, I am one of those Black women that I'm only going to put up with this for so long. And then I got to do what I got to do. And that's what I did. I said, okay, we attempted, we tried. You stood me up. So let me just do what I do and we'll go forward. And what's not going to happen is the diluting, it will not stop. Are you crazy? We're not stopping. We're just going to teach it in a way that it's going to be taught raw and real. You should have trusted our educators.
How can the public help you? How can people nationally help you? Is there a donation line or something like that? Yeah, because
Yeah.
I know because the government, I know Florida not giving y'all any money.
No, Florida not going to give us a dime.
Yeah, so I know that's done.
Only thing Florida give us is a hard time.
Yeah, right.
For the government. There is a donation button, and people that really care, and people donate from all over the country. When they go on our website, which is www.faithinflorida.org, and they hit the donation button, they get to choose where they want funding. You could our donation button, you can fund a particular work, you could fund Black history, you could fund how we have been impacted by hurricanes, and we just take that funding and give it back in ways that educate or a resource that helps our communities.
Yeah, as we almost coming to the end of the hour, but you did open up the door in this regard. How did the hurricane? Did Helen do anything to you all, or how you
Yeah,
doing? Because I was worried
I
you
mean,
weren't gonna make it. To be perfectly honest with you. So
Helen,
you
yeah,
know,
Helen bypassed South Florida and slightly touched Central Florida, which is like the I-4 corridor, which is Orlando and the Hillsborough, Tampa area. But it did some horrible destruction in North Florida. And so we care.
Did Tallahassee get hit hard?
Tallahassee, it kind of like went around Tallahassee. They got some damage. But when those other smaller counties like Perry, Florida, they took a hard hit. All of Florida is not built the same. If you come to Miami, our infrastructure may be built a little different than what some of our smaller counties are in the state.
Okay.
But we get our own damage, even if it's not a hurricane. We have some huge flooding areas in South Florida area where people lose everything in their home, and it was no hurricane. It's just the climate overall.
Yeah. Did it rain hard that night? What was it? Thursday night,
Yeah,
Friday
it
night, a lot
rained.
of wind. Did you bunker
Yeah.
down and go in the basement? What did you do?
Well, we don't really have basements.
Yeah, right.
The wind was horrible, but it doesn't, we was under a tropical storm watch in South Florida, and some was under hurricane watch warning. So, you get that, and to know that Project 2025 wants to get rid of that whole department, well, we wouldn't even get noticed that it's a hurricane. So that's something that was an eye opener for Floridians to know that. Do you know that this is a part of Project 2025 is getting rid of that department? But to see these large oak trees literally fall in the street and block the traffic where no traffic is going on either side. I watched that, and it, the tip of the tree landed on a young woman's car. That tree could have easily landed in the center of her car and killed her. And so the winds did come up to that type of force in South Florida, but it still was no comparison. I think in North Florida, it was like a Category 4, Category 5. I've lived through Category 4 with Hurricane Andrew, so I know what kind of destruction, it can
Did you
bring.
flee then, or did you stay home? Because they tell you
I
some people
stayed home, and
you stay home in these situations.
I
Really?
stayed home, and believe it or not, I was pregnant with my daughter, and when you're pregnant during a hurricane, after you get to be so many months, they ask pregnant women to come to the hospital, check yourself in, because the force from the winds of the hurricane can help induce false labor. And so
Okay.
I was one of those that had to go check myself in because of, where I was in my pregnancy. And once the storm passed, then it does not impact pregnant women that way.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my Hurricane Andrew. But then there are people that are in Georgia and then I think it was 89 lives lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now they're building our homes with a different type of texture and windows that can withstand the wind of a Category 5 hurricane.
Okay.
Yeah, so the infrastructure, how they're building homes now is built differently than it was in during Andrew time.
Yeah.
So, but that's not all of Florida. We still have some areas of Florida that have those old light poles where they will be out of electricity for weeks at a time.
Yeah, oh sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And
So
now the sun is out. Is other than whatever destruction is left, you're almost like it's a foregone conclusion.
yes.
And back
Yeah.
to work.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
it.
well, boy, I'm so happy you safe. Not just to be on the show, but I'm happy you safe. And we
Yeah.
need you on the front line, doing the
I,
fight. Because you say you got to have a guard at the church service.
yeah, man. I'm not allowed to travel by myself with my work. Whenever we have our statewide convenings where we're bringing faith leaders and people across the state, I have to have armed security now. And it all started from the stand we took on Black history. And it's just unfortunate. It really is. So that's
Are you
getting
scared?
no, I still don't have sense enough to be afraid. um, so yeah, that's where we are with this. Right now we are supporting because in South Florida we have large Haitian communities, and to know how they're being targeted, we're now uniting as one because we have more in common than what separates us. We know there's
Yeah,
systems that have been created to separate us, but
yeah.
right about now, if we don't come together, we all will lose.
Wow. Well, hey, we really, really, is there anyone that got a question online right quick? Herman, anybody? I know I saw him on with us. All right. Well,
I just want to know one
okay.
thing. Do you guys ever think about, like, can you adopt like schools, for people who may children who may not go to the churches? What can you, I mean, I know you can only do so much because you're an outside organization,
Yeah.
but
And
how can you help, give children who are in some of these schools who you feel that the history has been taken away? How can you reach those children? Do you have a
so
plan?
so in South Florida, we have a large amount, not all of South Florida, but we've partnered with faith communities, faith leaders, and their churches have literally adopted a school. My church has adopted 2 schools. But there are some limitations on what that adoption looks like. That adoption looks like, how do we come in and be a support to children and teachers? Therefore, everyone's job is safe. The Black history part, we cannot engage in with what we're doing, whether it's a church or the organization of Faith in Florida, because then that puts their jobs on the line. But what we do is we advertise it in a way where our educators or the students can come visit our churches and get the teaching that they need. One of our congressional leaders had even looked at what would it look like if we can literally raise the money for teachers to actually be able to teach it in our churches. And then the money can kind of offset the salaries of, it's not like they get paid their worth. Um,
I like that.
yeah, our educators do not. My husband is an educator. They do not get paid their worth. Our educators have become parents, godparents, grandparents, counselors, you name it. And their salaries don't match what all they do. And so this is where Faith in Florida come in. And, we fight with our legislators on their behalf because we become a voice for them where they're operating in fear and can't speak out. We'll speak out on their behalf. And then the fact that if our educators are not, if they're working 2 and 3 jobs, do our kids really get all that they need when they're trying to survive and make ends meet? And this is where the faith community comes in. How can we be a help? How can we give an incentive to help out in a way that helps both the children and the our teachers?
Very good question, and I love it. Herman, you back? I see you. You want to say something?
Uh, yes, and all I want to say is, when I read civil rights, the books about civil rights leaders in the past, and in the 50s, 60s, and things that they had to go through, it seems to me that we're going through the same thing over and over again, and you have the same types of, when you were making you were talking about the people who you thought or could have been on the other side, Black people who are on the other side, pretending that they're helping you, or maybe, and even not. They went through the same thing in the 50s and the 60s, and so it looks like to me you're the future of, we look back in history of the things that you did now, and marvel and at your courage and resilience and going through what you're going through now, just to make the cases that you're making now. So we again, that's the only remark I wanted to make. It's just because I see, it's like you're seeing the same characters in people, and people don't change, so I guess
It's so sad too. I totally agree. It is a sad commentary that some of us don't really even know our history or want to know. I'm gonna be honest. But then it's, you got the group that feel like they have arrived, and I'm like, arrived at what? Just, what was a great example, and I know we have to go, but I just what took place in Miami-Dade County with the football Miami Dolphin player Tyreek Hill. I watched that, whether it was on the news or whether it was through social media. And first of all, I already knew before, when they said he was stopped by Miami-Dade police, I already knew who stopped him. I already knew. They didn't have to get out the car. They didn't have to do anything. I already knew who stopped him. But then also it was a lesson that needed to be seen publicly, is even if you're a Black man with money, with prestige, with the title, look at the way they see us. And we can't, I just think it's shameful if we forget that still exists, even if it has to come through law enforcement. Just recently, when we watch the young man in North Carolina who they say, one want to say he hung himself. He did not wrap a rope around his neck 11 times. To know that exists still. The young men in Mississippi that was tortured by law enforcement, it still exists. So how do we forget history when it still exists? It's just modernized. And so, yeah.
And you know what, Herman, and we got to come to the end. What we see on the screen with us is one of them Ida B. Wells kind of lady. That's what we see right there. That's what they look like in the 2024.
That's
good looking, everything, good makeup and whatnot. And
that's all I'm seeing. That's all I'm seeing.
That's what them Ida B. Wells look like in 2024. Everybody, Reverend Rhonda Thomas, you can clap for her as you see fit. We got an icon in front of us. That's what they look like in 2024. Give us the website again, please.
Yes, it's www.Faith in Florida, and that's spelled out FAITHINFLORIDA.org. And then you could go on the website, you can see the toolkit, you can see all of the work that we have done, are doing, and getting ready to do.
Yes. God, I'm glad you're safe, though, for sure. That tornado wouldn't even have touched your house. He would have ran around. That tornado would have did everything. Say, man, I ain't going over Miss Thomas' house. because she'll get me. She got
And
an army. There
I-
ain't no rain, no nothing. So thank you so very much. And everybody who's been on here with us for this past hour, thank you for joining us. Come back next Monday. I think it's the 3rd of October. We're growing with this concept, everybody. And I got a lady, her name is Helen Lotson. She's out of South Carolina. Gullah Geechee, she's not one, but she talks about what Black history has done for her as she's made it her career. So come and join us next Monday, a week from today, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. So if you in sometime Central Standard Time, you got to come a little hour early. I think that's how it goes. Or whatever. You know how it goes. Join us. It's the same Zoom link too every time, everybody. And then go to her website and go to my website, businessintheblack.net, where I do my best to give it to you through the people that come on the show. Thank you so very much, everyone. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.